Okay, so today is of course Lag BaOmer, the 33rd day of the Omer, Yud Ches, the 18th day of the month of Iyar, which is the Rebbe notes, just like an Elul. You have Chai El, the 18th of Elul, which are Rabbeim or Chabad Rabbeim have taught us that it gives a chayas, it gives a life into the service of Elul. So Lag BaOmer brings chayas, life into our avodah of Iyar, the avodah of Sfira, which sometimes is a difficult service, examining oneself, especially at the time of mourning. So Lag BaOmer puts a chayas, puts a life into the whole thing, and we'll understand that at even a deeper level as we move forward. So everything we're about to read is, I'll give you the sources, but the connective tissue, which connects all these sources, is based on a sikha, a talk of the Rebbe in Chilek, in volume 22, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so there are two events of Lag BaOmer, and interestingly enough, both of these two things don't have like a clear-cut text, like a Talmud, which says X, Y, Z happened. These both events that happen in Lag BaOmer are both by tradition and only described by people who are later in the chain. I mean, it's not described by the original sources. It's people who say we have it by tradition at such and such. It's kind of interesting in that sense. Maybe again connected to that idea of the Kabbalah, which is all about this like secretive tradition, certainly in the classic sense. Now it's all written down, but initially it was all word and mouth. So a lot of this, you'll see both the stories, both the events that happened in Lag BaOmer, on the 33rd day of Omer, both of those events are written in the sense of we have a tradition that, as opposed to the Talmud which says X, Y, Z happened. So let's see. The first text is, and this is the more commonly understood reason for the celebration of Lag BaOmer, in terms of halacha, even though today it's more commonly celebrated for the other reason, which we'll get to, but from a halachic reason, quoted in this quoted Jewish law, is the following item. Namely, the Gemara says in the Vamis, second last word on the top of the page, Yuvamis Samach Beis Amud Beis, Yuvamis 62b. Omer, we're taught, Shneim Eser Elef Zugim Talmidim, 12,000 pairs of students, totaling 24,000. Hoyelo le Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva had in a number of schools, Begivat, Ad, and Tipras. I don't know where these locations are. Do you know where these locations are? But from one place to another place, I suppose it spanned more than one city. He had schools and schools of students that were all under his auspices. So he had a vast network of schools, academies, totaling 24,000 students, or 12,000 pairs. For Kulon, and all of them, Mesu died beperek echad at one time, during one period. Why? What was the reason, spiritual reason, for why they were punished with death? Says the Gemara, because Shalei Nagu Kavod Zelazeh, they did not appropriately respect each other. So Rabbi Akiva's student died via Olam Shomim. The world was desolate. Rabbi Akiva, the world was desolate. Rabbi Akiva, as we know, the Gemara says that Kula Tana Libud Rabbi Akiva. What's the lashon? I'm getting the lashon wrong. I'm getting the language incorrect. But the point is that all Torah Sheba'al Peh, all of the oral Torah tradition, in some way or another comes to Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva played a pivotal role in the preservation of the oral tradition. Rabbi Akiva lives, and more of the history will emerge as we go on, but Rabbi Akiva lives within the century following the destruction of the temple. So Jews are still living in Eretz Yisrael, but the future of the Jewish people is in a state of limbo. And a number of things are happening at once. They're living in Eretz Yisrael, they don't have a temple, they're under Roman occupation and persecution. So on the one hand, Jews don't know what the future of what Judaism looks like. So on the one hand, and Rabbi Akiva held the banner for this idea that we're not leaving Israel, we're just going to rebuild the temple. That's it. So, and historically, they had reason to believe that this was the right idea. And certainly it would have been nice if that was the right idea. And the reason why I'm saying this is because after the first base of this was destroyed, 7 years later, they rebuilt the second temple. So they were kicked out of the land, that's true. Even though some Jews, according to some opinions, most Jews, but certainly many Jews still lived in Israel during the first and second temple period, even though a lot lived in Persia, which is where Purim happens. And Israel is occupied by Persia at the time, under Persian control, foreign occupation. So they figured 70 years later, they rebuilt the second temple. So it's about 70 or so years after the destruction of the second temple, we'll build a third. And indeed, there was one individual, Bar Kokhba, as he was known. I don't think that was his actual name. It's a nickname, meaning the son of the stars, because of the verse which references Mashiach as Darach Kochav Miyakov. The verse in Parshas Balak, which refers to Mashiach's coming, talks about a star will shoot forth from David. A star will shoot forth from Yaakov, referring to Mashiach. So he referred to Bar Kokhba, son of the star, because Rabbi Akiva and many believed that Bar Kokhba would usher in the Mashiach. The third temple is going to be rebuilt. Why do we have to go to exile expecting 2,000 years of what we're doing now? No way. 70 years of Roman occupation, very nice. We'll kick them out, we'll win them, we'll battle them. And that's the first way in which there's an uncertainty, and Rabbi Akiva plays a pivotal role there. Another way in which there's an uncertainty is, and this became the truth later, is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai negotiated to defend and protect Torah. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is seeing that there is the possibility, at least, of Jews being dispersed outside of Israel, and understanding that when geographically Jews are not centralized, it's very difficult to preserve our oral knowledge that's passed word of mouth from parent, from teacher to student, from son to father, from father to son. So there's a requirement to write it, to create academia, schools of academia, and that's what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai did. He negotiated with the Romans 60, 70 years earlier to protect the academies. And Rabbi Akiva, as you can see, 24,000 students, becomes responsible during this tumultuous time to preserve Torah to the next generation, which is why he was very successful in building 24,000 students. And then they all die in one time. So the world is desolate. What's going to be with the Jewish people? Rabbi Akiva is waving the banner of Mashiach coming by revolt, getting rid of the Romans. He's responsible for the preservation of Torah. Both of those options seem to be off the table. 24,000 students died. What do you do now? And this is the amazing thing. This is one of the most incredible feats of Rabbi Akiva's life, perhaps, often not elaborated upon, is the next words. So the world is desolate. At Chabad Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Akiva went, to the rabbis of the south. There's a lot of history what this means. He went to the south. The Romans allowed more freedom in the north. He went to the south, I guess. The Shanalem, and he got for himself, acquired for himself, or taught Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Lazar, Ben Shamu. He collected 5 students: Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon. This Rabbi Shimon is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who we'll talk about in a moment, and Rabbi Lazar, son of Shamu. The Haim Himidu Torah, and these 5 reestablished Torah for future generations. So imagine Rabbi Akiva had 24,000 students. He's successful in transmitting Torah to a mass amount of people to ensure its survival within a very short period of time. That whole dream and everything he worked for how many years did he spend building these 24,000 students and all these schools? Gone. Doesn't give up. Takes 5 students. The demotion from 24,000 to 5, it's quite a demotion. And continues, perseveres, collects 5 students, and rebuilds all of Torah using 5 students. You talk about quantity, quality. When you talk about, like, especially if you're in a Chabad and you're in the rabbinics, sometimes you can bemoan the lack of the crowd that shows up. Rabbi Akiva lost the largest crowd and rebuilt it with 5 people. That's it. And the whole of Torah has been rebuilt because of that. So the Kabbalah comes by saying, Oiseh Shah, Tana, at that time we were taught, Oiseh Shah at that time. Tana, we were taught, Kula Mesu, this death that happened, this plague, Pesach, V'adat Seres, between Pesach and Shavuos. So there is this is the source for the mourning during that time, which, by the way, you also understand why, from all the calamities of all history, we're mourning this. There were times when more than 24,000 Jews died. But in the light of the history just described, how it wasn't just the people who died, but it was also the fright of, God forbid, God forbid. It was the Torah of being lost was at risk here, along with the general political upheaval that was going on at the time. This was like a makabapatis. This was like the last straw that could have broken the Jews from this whole crazy time, which began almost 100 years earlier, in the time leading up to the destruction of the temple. This was like the final blow. So it's a very
like a
precarious time, and the event was very, very scary. And this, which also leads, as we'll get to soon, in a moment, we'll get to how this also leads, understanding the depth of the sorrow of this period also helps us understand the beauty and the joy of Lag BaOmer.
Also, we have the Beitar, of course, is on Tisha B'Av. So we do commemorate the loss, but here it's the loss of Torah. The loss of people.
It's the loss of the theology, the precariousness of Torah, God forbid, being lost.
And it also indicated a very long gallows, because if they could not succeed against Rome now,
when would they be able to?
When they leave their long gallows, they realize that as well. That's what's so tragic. They're almost there. They're close. They're ready to build the base of Mikdash. They conquered Yerushalayim.
It doesn't work.
And then they lost everything.
Well, it's all kinds of stories. He messed up. He killed some of the Chachamim because of
That's what
anyway.
down. The Roman.
Okay.
But there's no mention of Lag BaOmer here. It's interesting.
No, so there's no mention of Lag BaOmer. It's the same. The original text doesn't mention Lag BaOmer. All it says is that they died during this period.
Right.
So now the earliest text, as far as I know, is the Meiri. The Meiri is a Rishon, a latter Rishon. So lived maybe 700-800 years ago, something like that, maybe more. Correct?
Yeah. Married like the 13th century, late 13th century.
13th century.
In Provence.
Yeah, from the latter Rishonim.
Yeah.
So he writes as follows. So Vatamidim Elo Husker Khan, these students that were mentioned here, Shekula Mesum Peretz Faratzeres, who all died between Pesach and Shavuos, as you just described. And then he says, the Kabbalah beyada goyim, we have it by tradition, by the generation that preceded him. I should say not the generation that preceded him, the era that preceded him, the goyim. So he's talking about a tradition that goes back 100 or so years before him, maybe even more. So that's why I said there's no source which says this is what happened. We have it by tradition from those who didn't write it down, but I have it by tradition from them, going back to earlier times. And what does it say in this? What is this in the tradition? Should be Yom Lag BaOmer, the day of Lag BaOmer, the 33rd day of Omer. Pascha Misa, the death died. The death stopped. And for that reason, it's our custom shaloi lisanas, not to fast on that day of Lag BaOmer, because it's a semi-joy that the death of the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva stopped. And therefore as well, besides for Lag BaOmer, during the period between Pesach and Shavuos, we don't have weddings because of the mourning. So what does it mean that death stopped at that time? Is it a matter of dispute? Doesn't mean that it only started. So it seems that the tradition is that there were 33 days between Pesach and Shavuos. It doesn't. The Gemara just says that they died between Pesach and Shavuos. But when between Pesach and Shavuos? During all the time, during some of the time. So it seems the tradition is that it was only 33 days out of the 49 days. So how do you count those 33 days? So one way of counting the 33 days is it stopped on Lag BaOmer. Okay, so it starts at Pesach and goes 33 days later. Other tradition have it that it goes from, I want to get this right, Reish Chodesh till Shavuos. So what's the 33 days that it stopped? When we say it stopped on 33 days of Omer, either it's symbolic, in that after 33 days it ended, or actually for one day it just stopped, the death stopped, and then continued afterwards, for some inexplicable reason. So there's all kinds of understandings of what exactly this means, that the death stopped, and understanding that changes the halacha as to how you mourn during this period, understanding when they died, before, after, and middle, all that stuff. Chabad custom is to take on all the stringencies of all. As Dr. Levi writes in Shulchan Aruch, you can't take the leniencies of all. You have to take only the stringencies of all if you want to, or just take one of them. But anyway, the point being is the first item that we celebrate on Lag BaOmer is the fact that the death of the students of Rabbi Akiva stopped. However you want to explain that. Then we have the second reason for celebration. It comes from the Chemdas Yisrael. It's only a couple of 100 years old, this is the Sefer, but it's the earliest Sefer that I found, which mentions that there's a tradition that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai passed away on Lag BaOmer. And he says, "V'nutze kosa b'sifra gadmonim," and it's found in earlier texts. I could not find those earlier texts. I'm sure they exist, and I'm sure other people have found them. And like the famous line, the Gemara is later in Yedaya, I haven't seen it, it's not a proof. It just means I haven't seen it. It could be others, but this is, or at least I found. I did the research last year, so maybe if I tried again this year, it would come back, but this is what I have. At any rate, the Chemdas Yisrael writes that I found written in earlier books that the 33rd day of the Omer, is the day that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai passed on min alma from our world. And it's a custom to dedicate this night, the night of Lag BaOmer, to limud v'razon dechachmasa delay, to read of the secrets of the wisdom of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, namely the Zohar, specifically the Idra Zuta, a section of the Zohar called the Idra Zuta, which is actually, the Idra Zuta is everything he taught on the day he passed away. The next text in the Zohar, which is there, it's complicated Aramaic, so we're going to move forward because we're running out of time, but there the Zohar describes how before Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai passed away, he collected all of his students and told them that I spent my life teaching you secrets, but the secrets I'm going to tell you now, I have never told you before. You're looking for your bag right here. The secrets I'm teaching you now have never been taught to you before, and on that day he teaches the entire Idra Zuta, which is the deepest parts of the Zohar. On the day he passes away, and he concludes by saying that this day is going to be a day of my celebration. So in the Zohar it doesn't say what day that was, but here you have the Chemdas Yisrael saying that I found in earlier texts that the tradition is that it was on the 33rd day of the Omer. And as he concludes, and we rejoice in his Hilula is a celebration. It's funny, the language Hilula, in the Gemara Hilula means a wedding, and the Zohar Hilula means passing. Interestingly, wedding and passing having the same word. One in the Gemara, one in light of Kabbalah, it's understood that the after the soul passes away, it reunifies with its source. That's a kind of marriage. And if a person lived a proper good life, then his reunification is of a great joy, because everything he's invested in his whole life gets elevated to a new level. And thus there's a celebration of the passing of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, as described in the next text there. Rabbi Shimon said, when will I get to bestow on my fellows, my community, these words, and we're about to follow in the path of Hashem, means he's about to pass on, and we know things, talking about himself, which will now be revealed to you, in these words, that which I've never revealed to you before. And he says from here going forward, all these words, but I see all these teachings, things that will answer questions and all kinds of things. And he goes on to teach this whole Idra. Okay, so those are two items. We can skip the next page. This is just a source, another source from the Eitz Chaim, which talks about how that Rizal celebrated Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's passing by going to Meron, from Tzfas to Meron. It's not a long walk. Do it in probably less than an hour, maybe a little bit more. And he talks about how Rabbi Rizal was upset at somebody who added a prayer of mourning during Lag BaOmer, because it's a time of rejoicing. He took his son for an option, to get his first haircutting. So it's another early source for this idea that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's passing is on Lag BaOmer. Okay, so the question that Tirba asks is, what's the connection between these two events? So first of all, it's interesting that Rabbi Akiva's students died between, the 24,000 students died between Pesach and Shavuos. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is not part of the 24,000 students who died. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is one of the 5 students that he rebuilt Torah with afterwards, one of those 5 students. And then he dies also in that period, on the day that they stopped dying. And both those things are a reason for celebration. The fact that they stopped dying, and the fact that he passed away years later on the day that they stopped dying. What's the connection between these two celebrations? And they seem to be opposites, in fact. We're mourning death, and we're celebrating the stopping of death. And then Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai comes along, and we're celebrating his passing. So they seem to be at odds, and yet they're both reasons for celebration. As I mentioned, colloquially, everybody talks about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai being the reason for celebration, although from the halacha perspective, the real reason for celebration mentioned in halacha is that they stopped dying, because there's mourning, because of the death, and then they stopped dying, so there's no mourning. So in halacha, the first reason is the primary, but in colloquially speaking, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's death is what's celebrated more, his passing. And the question is, what's the connection between these two things? And if there points to this idea and says, what we must say therefore is that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's passing, in effect, or Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's life, which culminates in his passing, as I just alluded to earlier, how someone who lives a perfect life, his death is referred to in the Zohar as Hilula, a celebration, because it's the culmination and the perfection of everything he's done in his entire life, reaches its absolute height. And because of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai's life, which comes to its greatest height in his passing, and that height is experienced and available every year on his yahrzeit, is explained at length in Chassidus and Kabbalah, that every year on the yahrzeit of a tzaddik, all the effort and work that he's done throughout his life, which comes to its climax in his death, is reinvigorated in a new life and in a new spiritual life on his passing, and therefore is available for inspiration and blessing, etc., which what makes a yahrzeit something that's celebrated and marked in Hasidic and Kabbalistic circles. So therefore, the Rebbe says we must say that Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai's life, culminating in his death, is the rectification for the mistake of the students. And that's why the two celebrations come together. They stop dying like Omer. In other words, the stopping of their death, meaning the stopping, that which stops the cause for their death, is Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai's behavior. So in order to understand that, we need to first analyze what is wrong, what went wrong with the student of Rabbi Akiva who passed away during that time, and how Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai lived a life that would have corrected that. So let's look at this.
Also, the deaths were different because they died from a plague, maskara, and he died like all by Nishika, like he went.
Yeah.
So that we can see the difference.
Which is 100%.
Yeah, but that's in his.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah. Also, like I mentioned, I also alluded to this earlier, how the beauty of Rabbi Akiva in rebuilding Torah, even after he lost all these 24,000 students, he lost his life work and then restarted again with 5 students. One of those 5 students being Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. So in Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai's passing, it's kind of the success of Rabbi Akiva. So in the classic historical sense, it also makes sense that they connect. In other words, he lost the students during this period, and here on that very same day, when they stopped dying, is the completion of his success, in that Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai lived a full life dedicated to Torah and promulgating the Torah that he taught. Which footnote would strongly indicate that Rabbi Akiva himself was a Kabbalist. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai is one of his prized students. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, we'll talk about this more soon, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai is apt and quoted throughout all of Halacha in the Gemara, as well as teaching all of Kabbalah. So we might, there's a strong reason to believe that Rabbi Akiva actually taught this Kabbalah. And perhaps we'll even cite that shortly.
These 5 were part of the 24.
No,
I mean they were part of his students.
Not 24,000. He had 24,000 students. They all died, and afterwards he went to the south, picked up 5 students, and rebuilt Torah.
But they were part of his school.
Beforehand, doesn't seem like that. No. It says he went to the south. It means he went somewhere else.
Right. That's okay.
So.
Yeah, he granted them smicha, which the Romans.
He granted them smicha on Lag B'Omer. That's some say also.
As well.
Sorry?
The Romans wanted to prevent smicha because they felt it was part of the rebellion.
Smicha is in the tradition of rabbinical ordinance.
Went against the Romans, and that's why he rebuilt Torah with these 5. And these are the 5 with the foundation of the Torah Shabbat.
Yeah, and the truth, there was even a tradition that he gave them the smicha on Lag B'Omer. He gave them that ordinance on Lag B'Omer on this day when they stopped dying, and later Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai dies. So it's all like interconnected.
Which fits well with the idea of chayes.
Sorry? Which fits the idea of chayes. That this the 18th day gives a chayes in a life into... Right, so there's death in the morning, and then Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, even in his death, is life.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about that.
He died almost like a mullah, like he didn't... He died teaching.
He actually died with saying the word chayim. The Zohar describes how he was in the middle of teaching, and Rabbi Abba is writing down the teaching that he was espousing, this Idra, the section there called Idra, and he quoted the pasuk which says, Kisham tziva v'esabracha chayim ad ha'olam. Where there God granted his blessing, life onto eternity, and when he came to the word life, he passed away. Kisham tziva v'esabracha chayim, and passed away. And the Mittel Rebbe, the second Chabad Rebbe who we read in the Hayom Yom today, had an affinity towards Lag B'Omer, and we celebrate Lag B'Omer very greatly, passed away the same way. In the middle of teaching Chassidus, and he came to the word Chayim. I think he said the pasuk, Ki imcha malkar Chayim, for with you God is the source of life, and when he came to the word life, he passed away. Similar to Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, so it's quite something.
Also, when he passed away, there was a fire around him.
There was all kinds of...
That's the reason for the bonfire.
For the bonfire.
Yeah.
That's because it was a kind of a miraculous, it was a miraculous event.
Yeah.
So many of the Akiva died in
a tragic event.
A tragic and a plague. It was an actual plague from Hashem Askar that the throats were...
It's Askar is like a... It starts in the stomach and it goes up into... It's kind of like a... Anyway. Okay, so let's dive a little deeper. All this is all true, and we're diving a little bit deeper into this, and what we're going to learn now is actually going to bring a good synthesis to everything we're talking about. And what we're getting to is, just so we're clear, is the mistake the students of Rabbi Akiva made, which led to their death, which the Gemara describes as they didn't respect one another, and how Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai lived a life, and his passing is the rectification, the tikkun, of the mistake made by the students of Rabbi Akiva who passed away. So let's see. So first, the famous statement in the Sifra of Rabbi Akiva, where the pasuk says, he quotes the pasuk says, "V'ahavta kamocha," the second line, love your fellow as yourself. Rabbi Akiva says, "Zeh klal Torah," this is the great principle of Torah. So of course, this is the obvious question everybody asks: how is it possible that the students of Rabbi Akiva's main teaching is love your fellow as yourself? How did his students not live up to that? So as the classic explanation goes, they recite this a lot, that there's a difference between ahava and kavod, love and respect. The Gemara doesn't say they didn't love each other. The Gemara says they respected each other. It never goes even further. The Rabbi Akiva taught that loving your fellow Jew is the principle of Torah. So his students were kind of extremists. Love my fellow as himself, so I have to bring him right. Tanya describes in chapter 3 the definition of love versus fear. The definition of love is the desire to get close, and the definition of fear is is retraction, moving back away from something in all of its forms.
Ratzav Hashuv.
Ratzav Hashuv, which is exactly the language you need. Ratzav Hashuv, desire to get close, and then the return and moving back. So it's something without love and respect. Love is a desire to bring close. So if you have extreme love for other people, you want the best for them. So if in your mind this is the best, you're going to push and push till they get that thing. So as the Gemara declares in Sanhedrin, Ein Dei Sein Shavis, no two people have the same view of life or the same way of thinking, just like the Gemara says in Partseish. Fein Shavis, their faces, their physical appearance don't look alike, so their mind also doesn't look alike. Nobody's two minds think the same way. So each student of Rabbi Akiva is saying, this is the correct way of doing it. So they each felt compelled to come out of love, to compel their students to follow the way they think Rabbi Akiva is teaching. And that's a lack of respect, even though it's love. It's love in its extreme force. It's a rotzoi. It's a desire to get close to all of their friends without yira, without cover, without stepping back and saying, I respect for you who you are. That's the difference between love and respect. Love is, I want to bring you as close as possible to me. And respect says, I respect you for who you are. So in their extreme love for each other, they felt the need to compel all of their friends to follow Rabbi Akiva in the precise path that they felt was the correct one.
It's like a clingy person.
Clingy, yeah.
Too much.
Without respect. And there was the failure. So now, what Deborah wants to do is where do we find in Rabbi Akiva's life this extremism of complete and full dedication to the point at all costs? Where do we see this? So here we have a story from Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva's passing, how in his passing he demonstrated and actually described his own desire for extreme dedication. And thus his students, with this extreme dedication of love for each other, lacked the respect for each other. So what's the story of Rabbi Akiva? This is the famous story of Rabbi Akiva's death, even though, by the way, he was very, very old at the time. I think he was 120 years old. He lived a full life, and yet died being tortured. And he's because of the story, he's listed on Yom Kippur as one of the 10 martyrs, even though they're not the same time period, these martyrs. So the Gemara says like this. The whole story, how him and another fellow got caught by the Romans, and Rabbi Akiva says, you were caught for doing silly things, I was caught for studying Torah, and the whole story. And the Gemara says it towards the end of the line. When they brought Rabbi Akiva out to be murdered, it was a time to say Shema. They were peeling his face with iron rods. Literally. Yeah. And while this is happening to him, he was saying Shema, which is the acceptance of the yoke of heaven, while he's being tortured. So the students who were present told Rabbi Akiva, Rabbeinu, our teacher, Ad Kan, that's how far you're taking it? That even in your torture, you're accepting the yoke of heaven? Like, where's the protest? Amar Lahem, Rabbi Akiva told them, Kol Yamai, my entire life, I was in pain. Al Pasuk Zam, this verse that I'm about to read in the Shema, which says B'chol Nafshcha, that a person should love Hashem with his entire soul. And what does it mean, this whole soul? Even if your soul is going to be taken from you. That's to say, you're ready to give your life for Hashem. Amarti, I've said to myself my whole life, when will the opportunity come to my hand that I should be able to give up my life for Hashem? And I'll fulfill it. And now I'm getting my life's dream of dying for Hashem. I'm not going to do it, and with joy and with accepting the yoke of heaven. He was saying the word echad at some length, as the halacha is supposed to say it with some length, to have in mind the unity of the entire world and God. And his light, his soul went out of his body with the word echad on his lips. And Yotza Baskal, a heavenly voice, emerged, and V'amran announced, Ashrech RABBI AKIVA, praiseworthy are you, RABBI AKIVA, sheyotza nishmasha be'echad, that your soul departed with the word echad. So what's they reciting this source for? To show you how RABBI AKIVA had this element of extremism. Entire life, he was willing to give himself up, everything. So the students, picking up on this, and then taking their love for each other in this extremist, could not respect each other. But they failed, obviously, RABBI AKIVA. There's another element of RABBI AKIVA that they failed to see. And this other element of RABBI AKIVA, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai did see. And that's Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's life is a rectification for the death of the students. What's the other element of RABBI AKIVA's life? Is the shoiv, the return. In the same way there's a ratzah, there's an extreme desire to get close. There also has to be respect to say, I have to go back to my life and live the way Hashem wants me to live. Respecting one another. Going back to real life and not just extreme abnegation, what's the word? Or extreme, I'll give up everything. But rather live a day-to-day life back in this physical normal world like a regular person with respect to other people, even though you have the feelings and desires of extreme love and connection. So where's the story of RABBI AKIVA which demonstrates that? This is the famous story, and this is, I alluded to this earlier, but I said that RABBI AKIVA, if there's reason to say, because Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai espoused Kabbalistic teachings, and RABBI AKIVA was the one who taught him and raised him to be Rabbi Shimon who he was, so it would follow that his teacher also taught Kabbalah. And moreover, as the present story is about to indicate, RABBI AKIVA clearly had mystical experiences. Whether you want to call it Kabbalah or Zay, whatever you want to call it, clearly had mystical experiences, even by text of the Gemara, which is one of the indications, even from within halacha, of the prevalence of mystical experience in Judaism that isn't from the works of mysticism. Meaning the fact that Zohar said that there were Tanaim who had mystical experiences, okay, you expect that. But the Gemara is telling us that RABBI AKIVA had mystical experience. What's the mystical experience he has as follows? Tanan Rabbanos, I just taught. And I'm using the gears of the Ein Yaakov here. Ein Yaakov is a book that compiles stories from the Gemara, and sometimes there's slight variations between the way the story is presented in Ein Yaakov and the way it's presented in the Gemara. And I'm quoting here from Ein Yaakov specifically, and I'll indicate why when we get there. There's 4 people entered into the garden. Entering the garden means stepping into a world of divine Torah mystical experience. And Elohein, these are the four who entered into this mystical experience together. Ben Azai, Ben Zoyma, Va'acher, RABBI AKIVA. Ben Azai, Ben Zoyma, both whose name was Shimon. We've had occasion here to talk about who they were and their significance in the story. Acher is Elisha ben Avuya, who became later known as Acher, the other, as we'll see in a moment why that is. He was called the other. They didn't even call him by his name. And the fourth one, RABBI AKIVA. Ben Azai, Ben Zoyma, Acher, and RABBI AKIVA. Omer RABBI AKIVA, RABBI AKIVA told them. Presumably RABBI AKIVA is the leader of the group. He's the senior. He's, I don't know what period this story happens, but he obviously has big yeshivas. He's the leader. He's the scholar. He tells them, okay, listen up. When you get into this mystical experience, you're going to meet pure marble stones. This is what it is. This is what it says. So I'm telling you, this is even in Talmudic texts a clear indication of mystical experience, because obviously it's not literal. An actual stone walking in a garden. And he says, Hizaru, be careful, says RABBI AKIVA. Shaloi Tomer, you shouldn't say the words Mayim, water, water. Don't say those words, water, water. Chassidus explains what this means, but not for now. Mishum Daksiv, because the verse says, those who speak lies can't be appropriate in front of my eyes. What this all means is explained in Chassidus, not for now, but the point is clear that there's a mystical experience they're having.
The simple explanation is that the way things appear in the vision are not as a reality. So a person knows the difference between reality
And what's
vision.
in the physical
And if
vision?
he thinks that it's real, what he sees is it's all called metaphor. Then he's not worthy for Kabbalah. And that's what happens. Because
Anyway.
when you're studying these type of areas, it has to be truth. You can't rely upon like
Yeah.
falsehood and sleight of hand and skirting issues. If you don't understand it, I still understand.
If you don't understand it,
When you give
back
a
up.
false explanation, is this making it much worse?
What's with Mayim? Mayim, why have Shai? These are all Kabbalistic things.
But
Anyway,
it's not to be interpreted in a literal fashion.
so the Gemara says like, the story goes on like this: Ben Azai, which is one of these 4 students, Hitzitz, the mace, got struck. Like Hitzitz means got struck, but struck in the sense of like a lightning, like overexposed, if you will.
He took on too much, like gaze.
He gazed too much.
He couldn't handle
Mace, and he passed away. So Ben Azai, which we had occasion to talk about other times, has also an extreme lifestyle asceticism, where he seeked to be disconnected from this world, and his life ended in such a fashion where he overexposed himself to a mystical experience, and thus his soul left his body and expired. It's Ben Azai. So he has extreme ratzai. He's like the students of RABBI AKIVA who took extremes and expired because of that. But all because of Omer and him, the verse says, Yakar be'eni Hashem, it's beautiful in the eyes of Hashem, hamafsel chasidov, the death of his righteous ones. That is to say, Ben Azai in his passing actually passed away in the best way possible, giving up his life, being overexposed to divinity. Even though it's not the ultimate purpose that Hashem wants, but there's still something to be said of that.
It's like Nadav and Avihu.
Yes, correct. I thought of Avihu. 100% parallels, absolutely. Ben Zoyma, the second of the 4, Hitzitz, overexposed himself, V'nifka, and got struck. Exactly what that means, if he had like some nervous breakdown, or if it means he got physically sick or mentally sick, something happened to him.
He lost his mind.
Something happened to him. Allah of the verse says in Mishlei, Dvash Matzasa, you found honey, Oichol Dayach, eat enough for yourself, don't overeat. Pentishabenu v'yekesa, you might get oversatisfied and get sick. And so the verse is kind of saying, don't overexpose yourself again.
But they say there's some ways we can handle it beyond your level.
Beyond your level?
Let it be. Otherwise, just
Acher,
your mind.
Katis Benetius, Acher misread the whole mystical experience and went off the path of Judaism. And that's why it's called Acher, the other, because he left the path of Judaism, because the mystical experience did not work for him. And Rabbi Akiva, Nichnas B'Shalom, entered in peace, the Yotz B'Shalom, and left in peace. Now this is the reason why I quoted this version as opposed to the Gemara. The Gemara's version just says Rabbi Akiva, Yotz B'Shalom, Rabbi Akiva came out in peace. But the Ein Yaakov, this version of the story adds, Nichnas B'Shalom, he entered in peace and went out in peace. Meaning to say, why do you have to say he went in peace? Just say he came out in peace. The point is he survived. Without changing, without being overexposed and dying, without being overexposed and losing his mind, and without being overexposed to the point that he passes, that he leaves Judaism.
He had the right intent going in.
Before going in, he had the right intent. Even his going in was in peace. Meaning to say, Rabbi Akiva's extremism was already with the idea that I'm going to come back and bring it to regular life. So even before he went into this extreme ratzoi, this extreme desire to get close to Hashem, he knew that he's going to bring it back to reality. So Nichnas, and his entering into these extreme experiences, B'Shalom was with peace, knowing that Yotze B'Shalom is going to come out in peace. And that was the peace the students were missing. Rabbi Akiva's students they took the extremism. Love your fellow in the ultimate extreme without pulling back. And Rabbi Akiva had that extremism. He wants to have Mesiras Nefesh. But Rabbi Akiva only took Mesiras Nefesh at 120 years old at the end of his life. Because in his Nichnas Shalom, in his going into these extreme experiences, he went in with peace, like you said, the right intent, knowing that the point and purpose is not to lose myself in these experiences, but to bring that back to a reality. Connecting the spiritual and the physical. Not an extreme aestheticism, and not overexposed to, not overindulgent, but rather to be able to go.
Tempered.
It's tempered, but and the point being, even as you experience the most extreme and sublime spiritual levels, it's all with the intent and knowledge that has to come back to a regular, normal life in the physical world, in which you respect other people, and not everybody's the same as you, and you can respect, not just love. And that's the life Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai lived. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai lived in these extremes, whereas most you have, for example, certain sages who excelled in one area or the other. Rabbi Nachman ben Akana, for example, is rarely quoted in halacha. So there were points. I was watching a talk from Rebbe last night on Omer, and not this talk, but it connects in which the Rebbe is talking about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, obviously, and he explains how there were certain sages who excelled in certain areas. Rabbi Nachman ben Akana is a famous scholar mentioned in the Gemara for certain miracles and piety, but he's not quoted very often for halacha. But he has a whole work in Kabbalah. Sefer Akana, it's all work in Kabbalah. And then you have on the other end, you have Rabbi Yehuda Nisiya, I think he's Rabbi Yehuda Nisiya, mentioned in the Gemara, who is Kul Torah ben Nezikin. He excelled in the laws of Nezikin, which is the other extreme. Not just halacha, I mean, as opposed to spiritual, as opposed to mystical, but the halachas that are to do with damages, which is like the lowest level, so to speak, within halacha, or the halacha's lowest reach within this world. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai lived in both these extremes. Extreme Kabbalah and extreme halacha. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is mentioned everywhere. Wherever you see the word Rabbi Shimon without qualifying Ben, son of somebody, it's referring to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Every time you see the words Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon says, it's referring to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So he's everywhere. He's quoted all over the Gemara, in halacha and everything, and then also in Kabbalah. So he exemplified and took to the next level this teaching of Rabbi Akiva of extreme devotion to Hashem in this extreme disconnect fashion, and at the same time bringing it back to reality.
Interesting, but wasn't his son unable to do that?
Oh, and that's the story I want to tell. That's the next text. That's the next text.
Able to do, but his
that's correct. That's correct. Yeah. And that's the next text I want to read here. Yeah. I'm not going to read the whole text, but the bottom line, because we're running out of time. But the bottom line is the famous story of how Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai ended up in the cave because he insulted the Romans, and he spent 13 years in a cave. What's he doing for 13 years in a cave? Studying Torah on the most extreme level of aestheticism. Completely separate from the world, overexposed to spirituality, and when he comes out of the world, comes out of the cave, what does he say? Where can I fix the world? How can I make it better? Don't put things on fire. Even though
initially
he
came out, so he had to go back.
He had to go back to learn that. Yeah, initially it's right. Initially he made it fire, but he came back to that. But this is the point. He had to learn this lesson that even in his extreme devotion to Hashem, never comes back to reality. And this is the interesting thing. This is the same Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai who says. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai also experienced these two. We see these two elements, and another thing from Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. The Gemara says Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai that he was an example of Torah Naseh, someone whose Torah is his occupation. He lives no other life but Torah. And the Gemara says Rabbi Shimon. Many tried to do the same thing of extreme dedication to Torah without living a life, and nobody else can do it. But Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai did do it, and at the same time he also said that the entire world can live in this physical world only on his merit.
That's right.
On his merit alone. So on the one hand, he's extreme distance from this world, and at the same time, full dedication to those living in this world. And therefore, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's life, and therefore which culminates in his passing on Lag Omer, is the tikkun, is the exact rectification for the mistake of the other students. The other students made the mistake of taking only the extreme love, which lacks respect, the extreme ratzah, the extreme desire to get close, without the ability to bring it back to real life, in which you have different people with different views. When Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was able to take these two extremes, and through his life, lived out these two extremes. On the one hand, the complete and full dedication to Torah beyond normal measures, and at the same time, full dedication to people and the regular world with respect for others, and fixing and correcting this world, and following Rabbi Akiva's path of nichnas b'shalom, entering into the mystical experience in peace, knowing that yotze b'shalom, no matter how deep the mystical experience is going to be, he's going to come back and bring it to regular life. Which explains, and this is perhaps my own suggested thing, I haven't seen it written anywhere, but I'll conclude with this. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and the Lag Omer experience described in the Zohar as this extreme mystical experience. You teach the Idra, the deepest parts of the Zohar are taught on the day he passed away. How does the Rebbe mark the celebration of Lag Omer? With a parade in the streets. Little kids holding signs, and people dressed up like clowns, and floats.
Didn't he mint coins?
One of the minted coins, yeah. So, you'd imagine, and some of the other Rebbeim did do this, that Lag Omer would be a time for asceticism. Lock yourself in the synagogue, teach Zohar, deep mystical teachings, and other Rebbeim did this, and the Rebbe also did this during certain Farbrengens. And yet, the hallmark of the Rebbe's Lag Omer is the parade. And I think, against this point, these two extremes. The whole point of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the whole point of these deep mystical teachings is not that they remain detached from the rest of the world, but on the contrary, bring that to the streets of New York. Or the Rebbe would call it Baruch Sharoni, the superpower of the world, on the streets of the superpower of the world, Rome, the modern day Rome. We're marching proud as Jews. And that's the whole point of these mystical teachings, to bring it back to that reality, to bring it to the reality of a kid making a bracha, mezainis, and shahakal at a parade. That's the point of all these mystical teachings. That's the point. That's the life of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and this extreme dedication to Hashem, and at the same time being able to bring that back to the world with respect for other people, and living amongst us as a human being. And the ultimate experience, of course, is Mashiach's coming, where Malach, and the world is full of knowledge of God as the ocean covers the seabed. We have these two extremes: it's the physical world. Nothing changes in this physical world, and yet the entire world is experiencing divinity. Again, these two extremes embodied by Rishon Bar Yochai and celebrated on Lag BaOmer. So, Lag BaOmer, happy Lag BaOmer. Utilize the time to bring down blessings. This is a time that the Rebbeim would give blessings, especially with respect to children and many things. So now it's time to certainly get your brachas in, send the note to the oil, and get all your blessings in today. Have a wonderful day, buddy.